Hey, how are you? Welcome to Live from the Archives. We're here at the incredible David Bieber Archives in Norwood, Massachusetts. If you want to learn more about it, it's davidbieberarchives.com. Special thanks to motherlode.tv, which is an online curated archive and a multimedia portal where you can find all sorts of new artists, and they're partners with David's incredible project that we have here. And my name is Dave Wedge. I'm a longtime journalist and writer. I've written a couple of books. I write for Vice. I wrote for the Boston Herald for 14 years, and I'm a big rock and metal guy. I've written for Revolver and Dig Boston and many different outlets over the years. But I'm really psyched to have this panel that we have here. We have Boston rock royalty here.
Yeah.
We do. And I guess Boston media royalty as well with this gentleman to my right, Bradley J.
How you doing?
How are you, Bradley?
Very well, thank you.
So I'm going to start with you, and then we're going to just have a little conversation here about this incredible facility. So what brings you to this wooden bench today?
Well, I guess long story or the short story?
How do you know David?
Well, I knew David from my time at WBCN. I started in December 18, 1981 at 4 a.m. And he was pretty much there at that time.
No surprise.
And he'd be, my earliest memories of David include him rooting around at like 4 in the morning in the library for no apparent reason. The door would open and he'd be going back there. And you know the album that I always reference when I think of you, Crowbar, for some reason.
Crowbar?
You pull out Crowbar.
As in the metal band Crowbar? See, now we're talking my language.
Yeah.
Okay. Crowbar.
I was doing research, right?
Nice.
Yes.
Good band.
Yes.
And my time at WBCN and then with BZ, I guess. We continue to have a relationship. He comes on all the time. And I guess that's kind of why I'm here.
So Chachi was here earlier
Yeah.
from BCN, and Chachi was hired by David. David didn't hire you, did he?
No, Oedipus hired me.
Oedipus did? Cool,
Yeah.
cool. So Henry Santoro, WFNX.
That's right.
How are you? So
I'm very well, thank you.
I'll ask you the same. What's your connection to David and this whole project?
Nobody knows David for a short amount of time. If you know David, you've known him forever. And David and I have known each other really forever. I can't tell you when we met. I can't tell you what decade it was.
At some point in life you met.
But I can tell you that when I would go to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, I'd leave my house in Brookline and drive to Lynn to go to FNX. David would be just coming home from the Phoenix or wherever it was he was, and we would be two ships passing, two PT cruises passing in the night, and we would, and I would meet him.
Yep.
I would meet him at newspaper drop boxes at 3:30 in the morning, where he wouldn't grab.
Sounds sketchy.
Where he wouldn't grab one Phoenix, he'd grab 30 of them, and he wouldn't grab one improper Bostonian, he'd grab 30 of them.
Gee, I wonder why you did that.
And
They're all here.
And they're all. As a
they're all
matter of
over the
fact, so when this project is done, when this thing is in the can, is it just going to go in a box somewhere? Is this going to get filed in a box up there?
Right.
We-
The entire thing.
You need to start collecting the actual boxes. There must be some Phoenix boxes around here.
Well, there's
somewhere.
got to be. Who was that? Rod Weber. I was talking to earlier out in the not so green room, and and he was asking me. He said, "How many radio stations are represented here in this archive?" And he was thinking maybe 3, and I'm thinking maybe 63.
Yeah.
103. There are radio stations from all over the country represented.
Obviously, being located and affiliated with as a worker with a variety of stations, and having friends in Boston radio, there's a great representation. So probably Boston alone, there would be 25, 30, 35 radio stations from Boston alone.
Right.
But you start getting into New York or Los Angeles and
Providence. There's
No. There's a
every city
lot of
that
stations
I-
represented.
Cleveland, where I was originally from, whether it's a matter of picking up their playlists of what they were, charting songs or albums or the most sold albums of a week, or the promotional items that the station generated. I would say over 100.
Yeah, yeah.
Over 100.
I mean, I know a lot about David, and one of the things I know is how something like this came to be. And when he was in grade school, and they would have recycling day at school, and you would have to bring your wrapped up newspapers and magazines into school to be recycled. This man over here was torn because he wanted to bring everything home. He didn't want it to. He was looking at that as why are we getting rid of this? Right? Am I not wrong?
I wanted to pay a penny a pound more to the wholesaler.
Well, we're glad.
Especially what would be heartbreaking would see a stack of comic books or the magazine Sport, and you would see that waiting to be picked up by the truck to be shredded and recycled and ground up. And I truly, as Henry says, it was breaking my heart to think that this was going to be gone.
Didn't you throw yourself in the recycling truck once?
We're glad you did, because one thing that we've been talking about on a lot of these panels we've been doing is that the younger generation, if it's not on Google, it didn't exist.
Right.
None of this stuff was on Google. It's all organic, and it's here.
You bet it's organic.
So
yeah.
I'm going to bring in my friend Jim Sullivan, Boston Globe, Boston Herald,
WBUR's Artery,
WBUR's Artery, yeah.
Best Classic Bands, and JimSullivanInc.com,
And Jim, you
BostonRockTalk.com.
And you and I, we've known each other over the years, been to a lot of shows together over the years. And when you walked into this place for the first time, what did you kind of think, having the career that you've had?
Oh, I knew David collected, and I've got a fair amount of things here myself that I've given him over the years. Valuable, invaluable, whatever, junk.
Until you put it in a frame.
Right, until you put it in.
You can't be muttering.
Then
under
it's
your
an
breath
artifact.
like that, Jim. No, Jim, I have to say, Jim is a very significant contributor to my delinquency. He has given me great goods over the years, whether it's press kits, magazines,
That's great.
books.
Yeah.
He deserves a plaque on the wall.
You cleaned out your home office and gave him all the promos?
It's an ongoing process that has not stopped. But you didn't ask me how we met.
No, how did you meet? Yeah.
Well, David was serving time at MCI Cedar Junction, and I was visiting. Yeah, actually, he seemed very lonely.
I was running off bootleg copies of Beatles at Shea Stadium
He was,
posters.
he was. And so our friendship just developed from that point on, and then
So it was a prison love story.
it pretty much.
We both like ivory.
I'll bring in Woody down here, drummer for the Del Fuegos, and now you are a substance abuse addiction counselor. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
One of the best.
28 years.
Great. This is 28 years sober.
28 years sober next week,
Good for
actually.
you.
Yeah.
Good for you. So 28 years. So what year was that?
1990, yeah.
My math is bad.
It's not-
I'm a
apparently,
writer. Del Fuegos, one of the iconic Boston bands. It's great to meet you. What's your connection to David?
Yeah, good to meet you too, man. And I'm really grateful for the whole Del Fuegos experience. And Boston's such a great, rock and roll
great rock
story,
town.
man.
Great rock town.
And it's right here. And my experience was, David said, "Hey, man, I want you to come out. We'll have lunch, and I wanted to show you this. What we finally have it all in one place,
Wow.
And this was this winter.
Yeah.
One of the first things that happened when I walked through the door was someone cracked open a box, and there was some Del Fuego memorabilia. There was a leaflet from our Roxy. The Del Fuegos did 3 nights at the Roxy in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And have people run up and down the boulevard, and they hand out these little leaflets. So
What was that? What year? We talking the 80s?
80s.
80s. Yeah.
Yeah, mid to mid 80s.
Okay.
It was because it was the time that we met Tom Petty from that show, every night we were like, does anyone know Tom? Can someone tell Tom? Right? And we were staying at the Riot House at the Hyatt Regency down the street. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. And it's Tom saying, hey, man, I'm sorry I didn't make your show. I heard you were asking for me. And, you know, I mean, it's interesting. And Warren Zanes, who answered the phone, and when we had no idea
Who just wrote a book about Tom, right?
started a very, you know, heavy, deep relationship with Tom. Yeah,
He just, I think he just
That was
wrote
the very
a book just
beginning
came
of
out,
it.
didn't
a
it,
couple
Jim?
of years
Yeah.
ago.
yeah.
Wow.
And that was,
Wow.
that was
And from that point, you know, from that flyer, my memory was,
Yeah,
you know,
well-
we went out on tour with Tom. He came in the studio and played on our next album, and
Wow.
we
Wow.
smoked a whole lot of really bad marijuana together. I'm just
Bad,
gonna be
bad
honest.
marijuana?
I'm
In
like,
California?
Tom, I love you, Tom.
Hey, you were in
You're a great
California. You didn't have the
musician, but your
Mexicali
marijuana's
green?
pretty bad. He's like, I apologize. We have a dry thing going on here in Los
The
Angeles.
Del Fuegos, though, were great in getting the announcements out with the leaflets and the flyers. And
Oh yeah, I
they
so
were
many
they
things.
were
Yeah.
they were really one of the top bands that if they had a gig, you knew about it because
Would-
every place was
Which
flying.
back
and leaflet.
then, again, to the point of this, I mean, this is being streamed online, but you had to back then. If you didn't, no one knew about your
Right.
show. There was no way to. There's no social media. There's
No.
not even any phones.
It's
You know?
amazing how the word got out that there was more so after parties that you would go to with bands and stuff than the gigs, because the gigs were always very well advertised, and everybody knew where everybody was going that particular night, but it was always where are we going afterwards.
Right.
And
I think it's
that's
also-
where texting and cell phones and social media comes in now. We had none of that then, but we all knew where the after.
And there was
party
a real lively community and connectivity. People were getting together. The show was the prelude to the rest of the night.
Right.
And that kept going, no question.
I think it's also speaks to how amazing the Boston rock and roll scene has been for so many years. That we would go out and do a show, and then everyone was like, "Well, go to the after party and try to see if the Dogmatics can drink the Fuegos under the table." I just want to go on record saying they never ever drink that.
You won all those.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, to that point, Jim, and then I want to hear Bradley on this. The Boston rock scene it's a very unique kind of scene. Maybe doesn't get the recognition that like maybe New York or some of the other scenes, but the talent that has come through this city is pretty unbelievable. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that, Jim?
Well, sure. I mean, I got here, fall of '78, so things were going full throttle when I got here with the nascent punk movement that had been called New Wave at that point, I guess. Deep bands like DMZ, Willie Alexander, etc. So, and the Cars, I guess, had just started going on as well.
The Atlantics.
The Atlantics, of course, yeah, good Atlantics. So anyway, the scene was very vital when I landed here, and
From where?
Maine.
Maine.
Maine was a state north of Massachusetts.
The way life should be.
home of sweet potato.
Home of a magazine I wrote for, Sweet Potato, a lot of moose, more than a few black flies. I could go on, but that's not the point of this. When I got here, it was like, wow, there's a lot of great music going on in clubs. I mean, virtually any night, every night of the week. And I started at the Globe freelancing in 1979. And newspapers were very different then, and they made money. They had space to write stories, and they had space to write stories about bands that were not famous. And one of the things I was able to do was to introduce a column called Local Pressings, which had to do with bands releasing their own singles or EPs or albums, and evaluating them, critiquing them, and then covering a fair amount of the gigs that were going on too. I mean, you would hear from other people, other fans, other bands, what bands were hot, making a move, what have you. And that was one of the good things about being at the Globe at that time. I mean, there was, you could go into the editor and say, I like these guys, I think they're worth covering, and you could get the space to do that.
You did features, you did live
Yeah.
reviews, you did
Sure.
reviews of new records coming out.
Right.
which is all stuff that's lost now. A lot of that's not happening anymore.
Well, the Globe certainly. I mean, their hold for music has been cut way down.
The arts
And
coverage at both papers.
The
has
arts
been
coverage has been
completely
cut way down. So yeah, I mean, my colleague there for many years was Steve Morse, and then Joan Anderman for a while too. And I know when Steve and I have talked about it, quite frankly, we were there for a heyday of both rock journalism and music. And
But you do have outlets like the Artery now, WBUR,
Oh, sure,
where
yeah.
it is still there, but I think you have to look a little harder to find it now.
you have to look a little harder, right?
So Bradley, same question to you. What is it about the Boston rock scene that kind of strikes you?
Well, it's Boston's a small enough town, and maybe there's something else about it as well, but anybody who wanted to, who was talented and had the energy, could be somebody in this town. I think you'll all agree. And that's not only musically, but on the radio. You could come from some podunk town like I did, and if you wanted it bad enough, you could be somebody pretty quickly in the scene. And at the same time, it was strong enough and big enough, so there was an infrastructure to support artists like that. When you went out, people showed up. And also, you got a lot of radio support, some from WBCN, and I'm sure Henry will say more from
FNX.
WFNX.
Well, it should. We should note that BCN really was the history of rock and roll when it came
Yeah.
to radio.
Yeah,
Bradley
absolutely.
J. Will have my respect till the day I die, because Bradley was the guy who played the very last song on WBCN, and that was to have that honor, to be able to put that station to bed the way that he did, is not only legendary, but really deserves a ton of respect.
And what was it for the viewers?
It was "Shine On You, You Lazy Diamond."
Crazy.
Crazy Diamond. Crazy Diamond.
Why
I
did
knew the Alzheimer's was going to kick in at some point.
No, we want to leave that.
Leave that in.
so
Shine on you, lazy
Shine
diamond.
on you,
That's
lazy
good.
diamond.
Bradley, why did you pick that?
All
song?
right.
The diamond that would not do push-ups, right?
Well, there's-
No, my song.
it's
See,
a
my
Neil
song was
Diamond
by
song.
Pink. My
He played a
song.
Neil Diamond song,
No,
wasn't that
it was Pink Floyd did "Shine On
Oh,
Crazy
my
Diamond."
gosh, that's right. Was Lou Diamond Phillips involved in that?
Well,
So,
there you go.
so Bradley, why did you choose that song for the last song?
There's a little bit of a backstory. By the time BCN was done, the program director was Mike Thomas. And probably Charles should have done it, being the king of BCN. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. And I simply asked Mike Thomas, "Can I do the last show?" And he said yes. And that was the only conversation. So it just natural. He never said, "What are you going to play for the last song?" So I started to think about it. And it had to have, everyone would expect it would be Bowie, for one thing, because I'm a Bowie fan. I couldn't do Bowie. It couldn't be the first one again, too cliche. I had to avoid cliche, but it had to have gravitas. And so just floating that around for a while. And I think I was in a car with FNX's and BCN's Mark Hamilton when I had the epiphany, it has to be Pink Floyd. Because it has the gravitas. And then Shine On You Crazy Diamond, as soon as that title popped up, it was obvious.
This is kind of I'm a bit of a sap sometimes, but
It was a sad moment.
did you cry?
No, I did that. I got that out of the way.
There's no crying in radio.
It was.
Oh, there's definitely crying in radio.
I have many a time.
Henry was crying about an hour ago.
I cry when I do a good segue. So.
Was there cocaine in radio?
No.
Not that either.
None?
No.
I've been misinformed.
There's a little bit of a behind the scenes thing. I back timed it wrong, and they were telling me we're going to switch the stations at exactly 2:00. Cannot be late. We're going to have this. By the way, the static you heard at the end was fake static because FM has no static. They recorded a cart that had static on it. I was supposed to play that exactly 2.
It's the hardest work they did all week.
But I mistimed it. It was going to go over like 5 minutes, and what do you do? And so happily the engineer goes, "Just play it. Like, what are they going to do?"
You can't get fired at that point.
That's right.
And so
You're fired.
sorry, that was it. Yeah. But it was it's very difficult to keep it together. I couldn't let my mind go there.
And now you're on WBZ overnights,
Yeah.
so people can still listen to you. If they want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
I'm sure you are.
It's WBZ. It's J Talking. It's called. It's midnight to 5, and there's the podcast, J Talking Podcast, which includes any good guest that comes on. The bad ones don't make it. David, of course, and all you guys.
Full disclosure,
Everybody but me.
He's the only
I'm
guy.
the only
I've
one that
done
hasn't
your
been
show
on.
as well.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
And, we try to keep it real. I'm pleased to say that there's as much freedom there as there was at BCN at its best.
That's great.
No one ever says anything about do this, don't do that.
There are a few words you can't say on these.
I'm very strict about that. Dave Tree, are you in the house?
Dave Tree's
For the
around.
future? Okay.
David, we have a box, right?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, go
Before
ahead.
you do that, before you leave radio, I think one important thing talking about Boston and radio is the college radio scene, where a lot of the FNX and BCN jocks,
Yes.
executives came from.
Yeah.
I don't know who wants to speak about it more so, but there's at least 5
Yeah.
good college stations.
Well, ZBC and WMBR are really two of the biggies.
Yeah.
Bradley and I affiliated with both of them. So many BCNers got their start at WMBR, MIT's radio station.
Yeah.
And there's ERS.
ERS is another one.
UMB.
Yeah.
But the point is that they have their historical place, but they also are very current in what they're doing.
Well,
and very
the Late
pertinent.
Risers Club is still on the
Yeah.
air. Is still on.
And it's
WMBR.
actually college radio is the one place left with that freedom that you talked about. They're not subject to the programmers' whims or the labels or all that. They're still playing just kind of organically what they want to play.
Yeah.
It was
There's a
kind of
lot-
like the Facebook of the 80s, wasn't it? You turn on the college radio station
Yeah.
and find out where you're going to be that night,
One thing that is pretty
like the
amazing
concert
is
report,
how-
right?
right?
it's pretty amazing how consistent over the decades the college radio has
Yes.
been. MBR, Late Risers Club, and Modern Rock and No Commercial Potential on WZBC are still pretty much the same as they always have been.
Yeah.
Including a lot of the people who have been there for 20, 30, 40 years, and they live for the 2-hour-a-week program that
Yeah.
they have, and they're very focused on the content, and they're very up to date with their music.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was doing a show, Late Risers Club show one morning with Carter Allen, and the phone rang, and it was this guy. He introduced himself as Paul, and he had a very deep Irish voice, and he said, "Got this band in town. They're from Ireland." And nobody's really ever heard of them and no radio station will see us. Because in order for you to be seen by a radio station, even today, you either have to have a show to promote, a record to promote, you had to have something going on where the fans can go see you. And this particular guy said, we just brought him to Boston to show them what Boston and other radio stations were like. But we don't have a show, there's no album. And I said, well, what's the name of the band? And he said, well, they call themselves U2. And I hollered into Carter. I said, you ever hear of a band named U2? And he said, no. I said, well, they're across the river. No one will see them. I'm going to have them come over. And 15 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. The guy, Paul, was Paul McGinnis, their manager to this day.
No. Left.
He left?
You did.
When did he leave?
A few years ago.
I did.
It's okay.
Their manager
It's a
was,
good story. You don't
their
mean
manager was Paul McGinnis.
He's not there.
But the Paul was Paul McGinnis. He was their manager, and in walks Bono, who was 15 years old at the time.
He was 15.
And
Had that little rat thing out the back. of
Yeah.
the
he
head.
did, yeah. And it was,
rat's
and
tail, yeah.
I just remember introducing, them introducing. Well, this is Bono, and I'm like, Bono, what? Bono, first name, last name, and he said,
Bono,
well,
about
my
to be
name
the
is
biggest
Paul,
dude in
but
the
they
world.
call me Bono, and blah blah
Yeah.
blah.
Who's even using Bono Vox?
Well, yeah,
Bono
right.
Fox.
right.
And he said, well, if you think that's funny, wait till you meet the Edge. And I'm like, the Edge of what? But
Jesus.
it was, you look back, and Carter and I, with the exceptions of a couple of customs guys, Carter Allen and I were the first two people out of 300 million people in the country to meet U2.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just, that's...
And they came on the show?
And they came on, and we let them back in the record library, and they would see television and Ultravox. They saw these bands, and it was like, this is the great. They loved MBR.
Wow.
And I
They
have
loved
a
it.
promo photo
great story.
of the band from when they were, on, it was accompanying their first release, probably, 1980.
Yeah.
And the description of Henry, the look of the four faces, none of it looked like junior high photos, not even high school
Right,
photos.
yeah.
They were so young.
And they hadn't. This was months before the Paradise gig.
Yeah.
Wow.
The famous Paradise
Yeah.
gig where maybe 350 people attended and 30,000 people.
I don't
I,
even.
I, I do
I
have
don't
to
even
ask.
think 350 attended.
Was
I
it,
think it
was
more
anyone?
like
Were you
50.
at that show, Jim?
Depends who I'm talking to.
I was
America?
not at that show. I will stand up and say that I
I was
was
not.
not at that.
No.
I was at the second one though. The
Woody?
next one.
I was not there. I was still living in Kansas.
David?
Yes.
You were there?
There.
Okay. Cool.
Wow.
Wow.
I was there to see Beruga Bandit.
That was a headlining band, and that band was confused because initially all the people who were in the room was at the Paradise well attended, and the headlining band was Beruga Bandit, and
Baruga Bandit?
Beruga Bandit.
right, an act on Capitol Records.
Were they Boston? Were they
No.
Boston? No.
And people got in, the press and radio got in on the Capitol guest list
Sure.
because they had this huge guest list. They
Right.
wanted to pack the house. And then, of course, people left.
Everybody left.
Was everyone there? Was everyone there to see you too?
Yeah, everybody was there to see you too,
Yeah.
and the band was so just.
And was that
Whiplash.
their first American show?
I don't know if it was.
I don't know if they played New York. I don't know.
Cool.
But-
So, David, to the point here of the
Well,
archives,
just,
you have a box
couple
here, right?
things that, I'll show one thing really quickly. Sometimes it's the box itself that is of consequence, and we're saving. So, we got that going for it. But these are just a bunch of more recent promo items. FNX refrigerator magnets. I don't know if you want to
Oh my
get
God.
close-ups of them or not.
Yeah, sure.
Everclear badge.
It's funny. I was talking about Arl Alexakis the other day.
FNX packet of bumper stickers.
I have
Look
one
at
of
that,
those, I have one of those
unopened,
on my
huh?
car right now.
And I'll show you the back here. Look at all those '90s bands: Korn, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fat Boy Slim, 9 Inch
You know,
Nails.
we're talking about
this is-
the heyday
look
of
at
the
this.
80s and the shows.
Blink 182, huh?
Postcards.
So
Yeah.
just to show you some current things, and then I just
David,
wanted to mention
David,
this
before you
too.
leave the box, do you have any gum? The double bubble? Because it's probably even harder now than it was when we first bought it.
Johnny
I learned one
Hodges.
thing: you can't save food. You can't save things
This
that are
does not stop you from saving.
Well, I mean, not to compare myself to Andy Warhol, but Andy Warhol had these time capsules. He put everything that he received on a daily basis into a box. When the box got filled, he dated it and sealed it. And after he died, the museum in Pittsburgh started doing a white glove treatment, opening all the boxes, and they were horrified to find in one of the boxes that there was something in there that didn't look so good, was kind of mysterious. Turned out it was a slice of cake from a Kennedy wedding that had been sitting in the box.
Well, do you remember when I had a bunch of signed Andy Warhol soup cans, and the conversation, I think I had this conversation with you, was, is the soup worth money? Because he would sign the soup can when I was hanging out with him. I would always bring soup cans for him to sign, and he would sign the soup cans. And then it came to
Wait,
be.
you were hanging out with Andy Warhol?
Yeah. But he would sign the soup cans.
Really? Really, you guys?
And-
No big deal.
And when I went
I was the
to
first
have,
guy to interview Bono, and I was hanging out with Warhol.
when I went to have the very first soup can that he signed for me framed, the conversation came up: do we take the soup out? And the answer was yes, because eventually the soup would have corroded the seal on the can, and it would have corroded the can. So we very, very painstakingly removed the bottom of the can, and then took the soup out, washed the can, and kept the label and everything.
Here's a visual aid.
So this is where we cut that out, and But at one time, I had a shopping bag full of these things.
Jesus.
And
This one they used to fill with crayons.
and this is what you put pot in now. That's
Put your weed
crayons,
in
yeah.
there.
Art.
This
If
is-
you want to do Andy Warhol art, look at
This is
that.
the estate
In the-
pouring Andy out for Perrier. You know? So,
David gave me one of these bottles, actually, the Andy Warhol bottle. But yeah, I had a bunch of, and if you came over my house and said, "Oh my God, you have a soup can," and I would say, "You like Andy Warhol?" If you said, "Yeah," you left with a can.
yeah.
I wish I came over your house.
Yeah, yeah. You left with a can.
So, for somebody you didn't like, you'd give a Linda Blair soup.
That's
can.
right.
What else we got?
Well, I just wanted to, all of my friends here, I'm sure, were vinyl or are vinyl collectors. And this is representative of a jazz collection. And I still haunt the vintage stores and go around and make the rounds and pick up things. One of the places, you could just, show a couple
Sure.
of these. But apparently a collector of jazz recordings died, made a donation to a vintage store, a non-profit charity organization, and I'm going through the bins and I suddenly am seeing 40, 50, 60 albums that I want them all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I say to the clerk, are there more? And the clerk says, yes, we just haven't brought them upstairs and processed them yet. So I said, could I see them, because I can save you a lot of trouble.
Right.
You won't have to bring them upstairs 50, 60 at a time. And so he took me downstairs to the basement, where it turned out there were 2,000 of them in probably as close to mint condition as you could expect.
Yeah, I was going to say, these are in incredible
Yeah,
condition.
Yeah, and I
They look
made
brand new.
That's
the
sealed. That one's still sealed.
on the spot offer of $600, and
They're
deal
yours.
done. Deal done. And the hardest thing was just
Moving 'em.
carting them away. Exactly. But these are the things that we know. That it's like when opportunity is right in front of you with pop culture items, you just have to respond to the moment.
Well,
David,
what,
what items have you rejected over your course of
I actually have something for David.
No, let him answer the question. Go ahead.
I can't think of.
You
things
can't
that
think
I've
of it. Do you have a
rejected.
short list?
No,
nothing really.
And
No.
I've been waiting for the opportune time to give this to David, and Jim will get the joke. I think Woody will get it.
But
you
will the
might
viewers
get
get it?
But
Will
no,
the
the
viewers
viewers
get it?
won't get it.
So
Called
why are
an
they
inside-
watching?
It's
But-
an inside joke. This
It's
is a
a-
little reward we give ourselves. Oh, excellent.
So anytime a celebrity dies or a rock star dies, if anybody of notable name dies,
That's great.
I, out of love and respect for that person,
Yes.
will post online
Yes.
that they are dead, D-E-D, dead.
Yeah.
And a lot of people took umbrage with it because they thought I was being, not nice, disrespectful. Well, it's done with the utmost respect, and so we had a bunch of T-shirts made. And David, you actually deserve one of these
Thank
because
you.
you were along for the DED Dead ride
Henry,
from the
you are
very
keeping it
very
alive.
beginning.
Well, explain a bit about the backstory to people so they know why you did this.
Well, I mean, they're really, I don't even know how it started. It started on FNX like decades ago.
Yeah.
And, I used to say so-and-so won't be down for breakfast. If Mickey Rooney won't be down for breakfast to this morning. And then from there, it just kind of evolved into, well, they're dead. They're D-E-D, dead.
Right.
And it just really took on a life of its own. And now, on social media, if people won't believe that someone's dead until it's posted that they're DED dead, and then they know that it's for real.
Yeah.
Well-
Well, Jim and I used to speculate in a pre-technological era that we should come up with a 1-800 dead yet number. And we saw that as an opportunity to cash out. And
you
really-
were visionaries, because now there's Dead or Alive and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We,
But
we,
listen,
still, we still play Dead or Alive. When one or the other hears about someone dying, we do a little quiz. No cheating. If you already know, you can't play the game.
Well, we thank you guys all for being here. Bradley, Henry, Jim, Woody, David, of course. Amazing project here. I mean, these guys are all part of it, so thank you for all the hard work you've done to put this together.
Thanks to them as
thank-
well.
Yeah, thank you. So that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Thanks for joining us here at the David Bieber Archives. Again, it's at davidbieberarchives.com if you want to learn more. Special thanks to the Norwood Space Center, which is the area where we are right now. Music drives us, which helps to support this amazing effort. Motherload.tv and, of course, MediaBoss. So, thank you.
Yeah.